As our faces and perspectives differ within the Atlantic Caribbean Union, so is the sound of our voices. I am Siobhan Sherman, and today's guest is Barrington Brennen, who will be speaking on the topic abuse prevention. Mr. Brennen, how are you?
I'm fine.
Wonderful, and welcome to Voices.
Thank you for having me today.
Thank you so much for consenting to be here. Now, today's topic seems to be a bit of a taboo within the church. However, I just want you to advise us specifically, what exactly is abuse and what are the forms of abuse?
Okay. Abuse is the use of and misuse of power. That's the broad definition.
Okay.
Abuse is the infliction of violence, physical or non-physical, on anybody. So that brings us to what are the kinds of abuse. Now remember, we have abuse within intimate relationships, meaning romantic partners. So we call that intimate partner abuse. Then we have abuse by guardians or significant others or parents on children. That's called child abuse. Then we have this broad umbrella we call domestic violence, which means the abuse can be inflicted on anyone living within that domicile based on relationships. But outside of that, we have sexual abuse, we have sexual harassment, and let me go on and share some other kinds of abuse, because it's good to refer to your notes, You have physical abuse, you have sexual abuse,
Yes.
You have verbal, emotional and psychological abuse, and we have economic abuse. That is withholding funds. A husband withholding funds from a wife, or intimidating her financially. Of course, we said you have child abuse, inflicting of pain, physical or emotionally on a child, and we have spiritual abuse. Most other places called it religious abuse.
Okay.
The misuse or the use of scripture to control another in an inordinate way, okay? Or to make someone feel extremely guilty, or to limit someone's power, or whatever you call it, okay? Then we have sibling abuse. This is between brothers and sisters, or stepbrothers and sisters. We have that a lot. We have in relationships like divorced couples or the couples divorcing, using children. And we have a term called alienation syndrome for parents who are fighting for custody of children, or children caught in between a battle during divorce. Of course, we have threats of intimidation and isolation. The partner, the individual, feels so controlled by the perpetrator that the front door can be open and they cannot leave. Psychologically, not physically. They're that controlled, and then they are kept from others. You cannot see this one, you cannot see that one. Immediately your sphere of persons with whom you come in contact with, even relatives, are curtailed. And then we have what we call ritualistic abuse. So that can be systematic behaviors, can be used in sex and stuff like that, where people do systematic physical things to control and abuse somebody.
So you're telling me essentially that what we commonly think of abuse is just as domestic abuse. You're saying that there are all of these kinds of abuse,
Yes.
but they're not only focused toward women,
No.
because that's usually the focus that we
Yes.
hear. So is it possible that all of those things that you just listed can happen to men as well?
Men, women, and children. Okay? Men, women, and children. Of any age, of any culture, of any socioeconomic background, It doesn't matter who you are. In fact, the persons who walk around with black ties and suits and dressed beautifully in their dresses,
Right.
they can be the most abused or the most abusive. So we can mask ourselves. So we know this for a fact. So it goes across all societies, all spectrums of society, and it's very painful. Well, what's interesting, Madam Chairman, is that abusive behavior there are four characteristics of abusive behavior. One is a learned behavior, meaning it is taught someplace. It is not something you are supposed to do, or you're born like you're trained to breathe, you naturally breathe. No, it's a learned behavior through society, through culture, through traditions at home. Could be from the pulpit in the church, could be from the classroom, wherever. It's also selective, meaning the perpetrator selects whom he or she would abuse based on what they perceive they have more power over or want to intimidate. Then it's permissible. Now, this is a serious one. Abuse only occurs because society or a family or a unit or an institution, could be the church, permits it to happen. Okay? Could be the school, could be the government, permits it to happen. Okay? That's how we continue to breathe fire on abuse. And then another one is it's cyclical or it's cyclic, meaning there are three phases of abuse. Okay? You have the honeymoon stage, should I say? Or let me start from the tension building stage, and then that's all the tension and the arguments, and it gets more and more until there is the actual abusive stage. When the person either uses violence or verbal abuse that reaches its peak, and after that there is the honeymoon stage. Okay? Now, guess what stage is the most dangerous or can be the most painful? It's the honeymoon stage, because that's when the victim feels everything is okay, nothing has changed or resolved about why this happens, and they please the partner, they go along, and that can be when the most subtle form of control takes place during the honeymoon stage. So it's quite interesting, this matter of abuse.
So, Pastor Brennen, you would have made mention of cultures as well as learned habits and behaviors and so on. So what I just want you to do for the benefit of myself as well as those watching is to dig a bit deeper for me, because the Union represents 4 territories but 3 countries, which should be the Turks and Caicos Islands, the Cayman Islands, as well as the Bahamas, which is the North and South Bahamas conferences. Now, I think we all have similar cultures, we all have similar backgrounds, similar histories, and so what are the common forms of abuses, possibly domain to us, that you can speak to?
Our territory, that is Bahamas, Turks, and Cayman, no different from any other place around the world. All right? And I did my research, and from my findings, domestic violence or abuse in all forms are no different than anywhere, any of these countries. In fact, in the Cayman Islands, with a population of 61,700 and something, okay, there were 100 reported cases of, I think, domestic violence last year, okay. In the Bahamas, we have a population of 350,000, and for child abuse, we reported 500 cases, okay, the year before last. When I interviewed or talked to the individuals and then doing my research, they are very concerned about the increase in domestic violence in Cayman Islands and in Turks in the past 2 years, okay. Sexual abuse, spouse abuse, and other forms, all the physical and emotional. Interestingly, in Turks and Caicos, there is just a slightly ethnic difference, meaning that a lot of the abuse occur among an ethnic group. Not that the locals are not involved, but in Cayman and the Bahamas and in Turks, a lot of abuse go unreported. Okay, rape is not as high in Turks, but it is in Cayman and the Bahamas. The Bahamas is one of the highest per capita in the world with rape, and there's nothing to boast about, but it's regrettable. Child abuse, we are one of the few countries in the world that would not align ourselves with the request from the United Nations to have policies to deal effectively with child abuse. We have a difficult time doing that, getting it across where it's passed in legislation. We have a very much difficult time. When it comes to rape in the relationship, the marital rape, which is not the name of the law, the Bahamas has a difficulty passing such law, but it does exist. That is the incidence of rape. Same thing in Turks and Caicos, okay? Same thing in Cayman Islands. So my observation is that in all three countries, the issues of abuse, all kinds of abuse, are similar and very serious.
Now, Pastor Brennen, you're saying that in your research. For the benefit of myself again, as well as the viewers, please tell us, what exactly is it that you do to help you get so deep into this type of work?
I'm passionate about helping building healthy relationships, okay? Now, I have my degree in counseling psychology, and I'm a board-certified clinical psychotherapist in the United States. I'm a nationally certified psychologist in the United States, and a marriage and family therapist, and an ordained minister of the gospel.
Right.
I did my internship in counseling psychology at a safe shelter in Michigan. And I also ran the treatment program for abusive individuals at the shelter, meaning the institution was called Safe Shelter, and we had two departments. We had an actual shelter for women and girls that was 15 miles away from where I worked. I work at the headquarters where I conducted the psychoeducation program for abusive individuals. It was a group program where I helped about 600 men and 50 women over the years that I was there, who were sent to us by the courts as 75%, or 25% walked in. And I was not even cognizant in the early stage of my studying that this was the area I wanted to go into, but I got more passionate and about it. And so that's something I am very concerned about. And I'm concerned also because of how religion impacts abuse. And I always found that interesting. Why? Okay? Then also I created a formula after observing human behavior and my experience and reading a lot, that I came up with this formula for violence. And it is this: when rigid spiritual or religious beliefs are joined with rigid family traditions, there's always abuse. Okay? Rigid, inflexible. Now, remember, it is not necessarily do not eat pork. Right? It is how we teaching that. Okay? All right. It is not necessarily do not have sex before you get married. It's what we are doing, what message we are giving. A daddy says, come home, curfew's at 11, and you come home 1 past 11, and he beats you half to death if you come home 1 minute past 11. I'm not exaggerating, okay? The rigid family traditions and beliefs combined with rigid spiritual or religious concepts and beliefs always, it never fades, produces abuse. Not physical abuse only, or necessarily, but emotional or psychological abuse. And by the way, emotional abuse is as painful or more painful than physical abuse. I've had women say to me, I wish he had beaten me the first time, I might have been gone. But to be systematically told you're not worth a thing, you don't have any value, I don't know why I marry you, you're worse than your dog, and all that kind of stuff. Over 20 years, by the time you reach the 25th year, you are trapped. You are literally trapped. And they cannot leave with the door wide open.
And that goes back to the psychological abuse.
Yes, psychological abuse, emotional abuse. It can be anything.
Pastor Brennen, on that note, time is really going ahead of us. let us just take this break. Viewers, please stay tuned because we have so much more to discuss about abuse and its prevention with Pastor Barrington Brennen. Please stay tuned.
Say no to violence. End it now.
Es hora de decirle no a la violencia intrafamiliar. End it now.
Mesdames, ne l'acceptez plus. Vous pouvez briser le cycle. End it now.
There's a way to end it. Say no to violence. End it now.
I want to invite you to the 8th World Congress for Religious Freedom. What an exciting time we're going to have in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, August 22 to 24 this year, 2017. Religious freedom is something which Seventh-day Adventists are so excited about because it has something to do with our ability to then share the precious gospel and the soon coming of Jesus Christ. But for all people, religious freedom should take on new significance as we see challenges all over the world. Join statespersons, individuals from around the world, attorneys, religious liberty experts, and many others at the 8th World Congress for Religious Freedom. I'll see you there.
Welcome back to Voices. Today we have Barrington Brennen, who has been discussing and leading us into a discussion on abuse and abuse prevention. Pastor Brennen, before our break, you told us so much about defining what abuse was, the prevention of it, everything about Cayman, Turks, as well as the Bahamas in terms of statistics. Now, can you please just give us an idea for the benefit of everyone? Where can those who are being abused right now, where can they go to get help?
Well, the Adventist Church has done wonderful things starting maybe in the late 90s to address this issue. And around the 2000, they came up with, I think about 2000, these brochures I have in my hand here that are very helpful, very helpful. I have been giving these out for maybe 10 years. I always keep a little bit so I can show off like this. These are actually for the victims or the perpetrators. For this one, are you being abused by your boyfriend or husband? Are you being abused by your girlfriend or wife? Has your child been abused? You can stop violence. Are you being abused by someone? Do you know someone who is abused? We have all of these in package. They're very cheap. I've given about to many Adventists, many times in our churches here, many years ago. And so we have tools. We have that can help. Another thing is in 2001, I think it is, the Adventist Church, out of this concern for abuse and knowing the statistics, they decided to start what we call Abuse Prevention Day, the 4th Sabbath of August every year. And I was doing that ever since. In fact, I was doing that before that. Mm-hmm. While living in the States, we had the privilege, myself and Mabel Dunbar, she ran the shelter, of speaking to the General Conference leaders about we should be doing something. So I started. And eventually they started something. And then that Abuse Prevention Day, they changed the name to End It Now.
Yes,
okay?
Violence Against
And
Women.
the program for End It Now is already on the website. I'm going to make sure it's standalone on our conference's website. There is an actual slide presentation, there's actual sermon, there's a children's story, very clear. If a church who doesn't have a pastor can just use the sermon, okay? So every year since 2003, I think 2001 or 3, the Adventist Church around the world has been having this Abuse Prevention Day, the fourth Sabbath of August. So every church should be doing that. Okay? Now, in the Cayman Islands, as a nation, about 5 years ago, I wanted to know what were they doing, so I did my research, and I came across their safe shelter. They have a shelter called the Crisis Center, and they have 40 women, 53 women, 56 women over a period of a year that be a part of that shelter, and for children to help women and children who are being abused. Okay. The Bahamas also has a safe shelter, started by Dr. Sandra Dean Patterson in 1983. Cayman Islands started in 2003.
Okay.
Okay. Bahamas in 1983, and it's located on East Street on top of the hill opposite the police barracks. Now that's not where the women stay. If it was, I couldn't say it. Okay.
Right.
In fact, the Crisis Center never had a secret, confidential safe shelter. Okay. What it has is individuals who are willing to volunteer as a safe house for temporary time, overnight, 2 or 3 days, and you wouldn't know who they are. Or they would pay for you to stay in a private hotel for several weeks or months. They keep out of the way. However, in the Bahamas, there is a safe shelter now run by Links. And so and I have actually taken women there with children. A very nice place. I cannot say where it is because it's confidential.
Correct.
Okay, but we do have one, so it's there.
Okay, so
Now,
that's in the Bahamas.
That's
and
in the
then
Bahamas.
you say
In the
Cayman
Cayman Islands, they have the Crisis Center also, a beautiful place where women can be housed away from abuse. Now, by the way, all of these centers, you don't live there permanently. They have a time, could be 3 months, 2 months or so, and they need to get you out. You can't stay in there permanently, you know. And we ran one in Michigan, and eventually we had 2, okay? The we meaning the safe shelter where I work. This is not an Adventist organization.
That's
this is
fine.
a county organization. And now in Turks and Caicos, there is none. Turks and Caicos does not have any hotline for people to call 24 hours. Cayman Island has a hotline, the number 345-943-2442.
Yes.
That's for Cayman Islands.
Good.
Call 24/7. I called it this morning. And it answered. It answered, and I talked to them. The Bahamas, through the Crisis Center, also has a 24-hour helpline, and that number is 242-328-0922. The Bahamas Crisis Center. When the Bahamas Crisis Center was started in 1982 or 3, I said, 35 years ago, it was called the Women Crisis Center. And then in 1995, the name was changed to the Crisis Center. You know why? Because more and more men were coming in, and they still are coming in, complaining of abuse by their spouses or their significant others in their lives. So it's the Crisis Center. Now, there's no help like this in Turks and Caicos. There's none.
However, is there some... who do they turn to then?
Are
you saying that they have no
with
hope?
My conversation this morning with someone who should know at Turks and Caicos,
Yes.
there's no one. Families would help, maybe churches would help, but there's no telephone number, there's no organized program in Turks and Caicos, and they're working on that. They want it. They desperately need it, and they want it. Now, in the Adventist Church, when I lived in Michigan, Mabel Dunbar, an Adventist, and her husband, Colin Dunbar, is a pastor, she had a passion, and her passion was to start an Adventist-sponsored, privately, not owned by the church, safe shelter. And it didn't start until I left in 1996, but I'm on the board. It's called Women in Renewal, and they have 5 safe houses or shelter all over the United States, specifically so Adventist women can come. Okay? Now, it's not only for Adventists, but I'm saying it's for Adventists. when we ran, listen to this now, we're talking to an Adventist organization. We ran this public safe shelter for women and children in Barron County, Michigan, Benton Harbor, and wherever the shelter was 15 miles away, okay? And Adventists drove from Nebraska or Canada or New York to that shelter, women trying to find a safe place because they heard an Adventist ran that shelter. It's not an Adventist shelter, okay? And so we were amazed to see how many Adventist women were being abused, okay? And then 3 or 4 years ago, Women in Renewal was invited to go to England, to London, to start the program there. It started as a telephone helpline and prayer center by Safe Shelter, by Women in Renewal. So people are calling them all over the world to help organize an Adventist-run safe shelter for women. And those of you who are listening, you were saying now, let's do it. It's not easy. I'm telling you, I'm on the board of Women in Renewal. It's not easy. Not saying it's impossible. So it calls a lot of work. It calls a lot of financing.
Right.
To have a 24-hour, 7 days a week, someone has to be up 24 hours a day. You know, food. It's something else. Then you want professionally trained people to run it, or at least to provide counseling and therapy for the individuals. And it's so important for us to be there and care and reach out for individuals. We're blessed in the Bahamas in that we have much more than Cayman and Turks, maybe because we're bigger, because we have an older safe shelter. That's the crisis center,
Yes.
helping people, and they help a lot, thousands every year, okay? And then we have this institution now for safe haven for abused women, and we need more. Now the church needs to get more involved.
Pastor Brennen, we will have to end on that note. I want to thank you so much for your knowledge, for your time, and perhaps we can have you back again to continue this discussion, because it's such an important discussion that all of us in the church need to take note in.
I would like definitely to share. There are a lot of things the church can do or should do to help in this area, with not even having a safe shelter.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you so much for staying tuned with us as we discussed abuse and abuse prevention with Pastor Barrington Brennen. As this is a wonderfully produced production of the Atlantic Caribbean Union, we just want to thank you so much, and we hope to see you next week. Until then, God bless you.